Why was she always the quiet one in the room, the one they never saw coming? The morning sun stretched long and golden over the naval base, glinting off steel hangars and distant waves as Sarah Martinez tied her running shoes in the locker room. She moved with quiet precision, every motion deliberate, calm, like someone who had learned to measure her life in seconds and choices. She didn't look up when the door swung open, didn't flinch when laughter echoed off the cold tiles behind her. This was familiar, too familiar. She'd been here 3 weeks, and already the whispers had started. New postings always came with that, a slow storm of curiosity and judgment. But here, in this tightly wound circle of seasoned petty officers, that curiosity had turned sharp. They noticed how she came and went without explanation, how she skipped social events, how her name appeared on schedules no one else could access. So they talked, and this morning they decided to act. "Look what we have here," said a voice behind her, low, mocking, and all too confident. Sarah's hands paused on her laces. She knew that voice. Jessica Chen. 2 years on base, 2 years of controlling every social circle like it was her own command post. The kind of woman who needed an audience to feel strong. Sarah finished tying her shoes before speaking. "Good morning," she said softly. No edge, no invitation, just civility wrapped in calm. Jessica chuckled. "We've been talking, and we can't figure out what it is you do around here." Her two shadows, Amanda Rodriguez and Kelly Thompson, closed in behind her, smirking. "You disappear for hours," Amanda said, "always off somewhere, no one knows where." Kelly added, "You act like you're too good to join us for drinks, or maybe you just don't like people." Sarah stood slowly, closing her locker with a quiet click. She met Jessica's gaze. "I do my job," she said simply, "same as everyone else." Jessica tilted her head. "Oh, and what job would that be? Filing reports, ordering printer paper." The laughter that followed wasn't cruel, it was performative, the kind meant to sting. Inside, Sarah felt that old knot tighten in her chest, the one she'd spent years mastering how to hide. She wasn't angry. Not yet. She'd seen this before. People who needed to chip away at others to feel secure in themselves. "I'm not trying to make anyone uncomfortable," she said quietly, slinging her gym bag over her shoulder. "I just like to keep to myself." "Keep to yourself," Jessica repeated with a mocking smile. "That's rich. You think you're better than us, don't you?" Sarah's heart gave a small twist. She didn't think she was better. She just thought differently. Years of silence, secrets, and sacrifice had shaped her into someone who lived between the lines of normal life. But how could she explain that? She couldn't. "I don't think I'm better than anyone," she replied. "I'm just here to do my best." Kelly scoffed. "Your best? What, running errands? You're not exactly SEAL material, Martinez." That one hit harder than it should have. Because it wasn't wrong, and yet it was entirely wrong. If only they knew. Jessica stepped closer, arms crossed. "Let's be honest. You got this posting because someone felt sorry for you. Maybe you knew someone, pulled strings, happens all the time." Sarah's jaw tightened, but her eyes stayed steady. She fought too long, bled too much, lost too many brothers and sisters to ever accept that accusation again. Every scar on her hands, every sleepless night, every memory she couldn't share, that was how she'd earned her place. "That's not how it works," she said evenly. "Isn't it?" Amanda pressed. "Because it looks like that. You show up out of nowhere, act all mysterious, and expect us to just accept it." The locker room felt smaller now. The walls seemed to breathe, closing in as the three formed a half-circle around her. It was the classic pack move. One alpha, two enforcers, closing ranks on the quiet target. Sarah had studied this behavior before. In other settings, under very different lighting. In war zones. and once in a dark hallway in Kandahar, where the pack carried rifles instead of sarcasm. The dynamic was the same. The energy, the instinct to dominate what they didn't understand. She looked at Jessica, confident, brittle, fueled by insecurity. At Amanda, watching Jessica for cues, needing approval. At Kelly, the instigator, eager to see drama unfold. "I should go," Sarah said, stepping toward the door. "My run won't complete itself." Jessica blocked her path. "Not so fast, Martinez. We're not done talking." The tension thickened. Sarah's instincts began to hum. Not fear, readiness. Her body calculated distances, exits, the angle of the door hinge. Old reflexes. Unwanted but always there. "What do you want from me?" she asked softly. Jessica's smirk returned. "We want you to explain yourself. We want to know why you're here and why you think you're special." Sarah almost laughed. Special? If they only knew how much she wished she was. "I'm nobody special," she said, and she meant it. "I'm just trying to serve my country and do my job." Jessica's smile faded. The calm in Sarah's voice unsettled her more than anger would have. "Nobody special," she repeated. "Then why do you get called into private meetings with the base commander? Why do you have access to areas the rest of us do?" That landed hard. Sarah's heartbeat quickened, but only slightly. They'd been watching her. More closely than she realized. Amanda folded her arms. "You vanish for days, come back like nothing happened. 12 days gone in 3 weeks. That's not paperwork, sweetheart." Sarah exhaled slowly. She'd underestimated them. While she'd been maintaining cover, they'd been conducting surveillance of their own. "Some assignments require flexibility," she said carefully. "I go where I'm needed." "Where you're needed," Kelly repeated with mock interest. "That's cute. Administrative clerks don't get emergency calls at 600 and helicopter pickups at midnight." That made Sarah's blood run cold. They'd seen the extraction. Heard the rotors. Noticed the unmarked helicopter landing by the comms building 2 weeks ago. That mission had been classified, Black Ops level clearance. If her cover was slipping this far, it wasn't just inconvenient. It was dangerous. "You three spend a lot of time watching other people's business," Sarah said quietly. "Maybe focus on your own." Jessica's temper flared. "Don't turn this around on us. We're not the ones skulking around pretending to be something we're not." The irony struck Sarah like a whisper of fate. Because that's exactly what she was doing, pretending. Not out of deceit, but duty. Amanda tilted her head. "You know what I think, you're some kind of spy." Sarah froze. The air between them shifted, curiosity laced with accusation. Kelly stepped forward. "Yeah, maybe not foreign, but intelligence. That would explain everything." "That's ridiculous," Sarah said. But her voice, steady as it was, carried a tension they caught. Jessica leaned in. "Is it? You take pictures of restricted areas, right? We saw you at the communications building last Tuesday night." Sarah's breath hitched only slightly, but it was enough. That night had been part of a security assessment, mapping potential vulnerabilities in base defense protocols. Completely authorized. Completely classified. "You're mistaken," she said, but her tone lacked its earlier calm. Jessica took another step forward. "We saw you using some kind of device, measuring distances, taking notes. That's not admin work." Every detail was right, every interpretation wrong. Those observations, taken out of context, painted her as something she was. A threat. "You're letting your imaginations run wild," Sarah said firmly. "I'm not spying on anyone." "Really?" Amanda said. "Then who authorized your little midnight photography sessions?" The room went silent except for the hum of fluorescent lights. 3 pairs of eyes locked on her, waiting for something, anything, that would make sense. She couldn't give it. Not without blowing her cover, endangering missions, and violating every oath she'd ever sworn. Some things are compartmentalized, Sarah said at last. Not everyone has a need to know. Jessica's eyes hardened. So that's it, you do have clearance, we don't. Sarah's silence confirmed it more than words ever could. Jessica moved closer, frustration spilling into aggression. You think you're above us, she hissed. You walk around here like you're made of secrets. Well, we deserve answers. Then contact. Jessica's hand clamped around Sarah's arm. Everything in Sarah's body changed in an instant. The hum of danger became focus. Her training, years of it, ignited like a match. Her voice was quiet even. I'm going to ask you once, she said, eyes fixed on Jessica. Let go of my arm. Jessica smirked. Or what? You'll run crying to your mysterious supervisor. Amanda and Kelly stepped closer, sensing blood in the water. The air thickened, sharp with challenge. Sarah could almost hear her instructor's voice again. Calm, clinical, diffuse, redirect, control the pace. You don't know anything about me, Sarah said softly. Kelly laughed. We know enough, Daddy's money maybe, trying to play soldier. Sarah's jaw flexed. 5 seconds, she said quietly. Let go. Jessica tightened her grip. And then everything happened at once. A shift of weight. A pivot. A single, fluid motion that looked effortless but carried decades of precision. In less than 2 seconds, Sarah broke Jessica's hold using a pressure point and stepped back, calm, poised, ready. The movement was surgical, controlled, beautiful. And it terrified them. Amanda's eyes widened. How did you? Jessica cradled her hand, shock replacing arrogance. You think you're some kind of martial arts expert. Sarah didn't answer. Her breathing was steady. Her posture no longer defensive, it was commanding. Predatory even. The air had shifted completely. They weren't in control anymore. She was. Kelly's voice trembled. What kind of training have you had? Sarah hesitated. She could feel the crossroads approaching, the one every covert operator dreaded. One truth away from total exposure. Standard Navy training, she said quietly. Jessica gave a bitter laugh. Standard Navy training doesn't look like that. Her tone had lost its edge, replaced by something else. Recognition. Fear. Amanda whispered, You're not admin, are you? Sarah didn't reply. The silence spoke louder than words. Then, just as Jessica opened her mouth again, the locker room door burst open. A young seaman stumbled in, breathing hard. He looked straight at Sarah. Ma'am, he said urgently, you're needed immediately. There's been a situation. The 3 women froze. Sarah straightened. Her expression, calm moments ago, shifted. Every trace of softness vanished, replaced by focus sharp enough to cut glass. What kind of situation? She asked. Hostage situation, ma'am, the seaman said. Main gate, commands requesting you for tactical assessment. Jessica blinked. Wait, what? But Sarah was already moving. Collecting her gear. Her voice crisp, clipped, professional. How many hostiles? What's the time frame? Single subject, assault rifle, possible explosives, the seaman said. Base commander transferred operational command to you 5 minutes ago. And in that single sentence, the entire room changed. The bully's smirk faded. The laughter died. And for the first time they saw her, really saw her. Not the quiet girl in the corner. Not the ghost in admin. But the woman the commander called when everything went wrong. What kind of person walks toward gunfire when everyone else is told to take cover? Sarah didn't hesitate. The moment the words, hostage situation, left the seaman's mouth, the noise of the locker room faded into a distant hum. Her pulse slowed. Her breathing evened. The switch had flipped, the one she could never unlearn. "Time since contact?" she asked, already moving. 15 minutes, ma'am. Subject's unstable, threatening to execute hostages if his demands aren't met within 30. Sarah nodded once. "Notify command I'm en route." Jessica's voice cracked the silence behind her. "Wait, what do you mean command requested you? You're what exactly?" But Sarah didn't answer. She moved with purpose, opening her duffel, retrieving what, until now, looked like workout gear. Now it revealed another story. A compact radio, a folded tactical vest disguised as a training shirt, gloves reinforced at the knuckles, a headset so small it almost disappeared into her palm. Kelly's mouth fell open. "What is that?" Sarah slid the vest on without replying. The weight settled against her like an old friend. "Lieutenant Commander Martinez," the seaman added quickly. "Commander Peterson transferred full tactical authority to you." The words landed like thunder. Jessica felt her stomach drop. "Lieutenant Commander. Not admin, not paperwork. Command." Sarah zipped the vest and turned. Her tone was steady, professional, yet almost gentle. "It means I'm the person they call when things get complicated." Amanda whispered, "You're your special ops." Sarah didn't confirm or deny it. She just picked up her sidearm holster from the bottom of the bag empty, as required on base, but her motion betrayed muscle memory too deep to hide. "Ma'am, we have vehicles waiting," the seaman said. "I'll walk." He hesitated. "It's half a mile to the main gate." "I need the time to think." She turned toward the three women who had been her accusers minutes ago. They stood rigid, the confidence gone, replaced by dawning realization and guilt. "Everything you've seen here," she said quietly, "stays here. Operational security, understood?" They nodded, mute. Then she was gone, boots echoing down the corridor, each step purposeful, each movement reclaiming a truth she tried to bury under normalcy. Outside, the wind coming off the ocean carried the faint smell of jet fuel and salt. Sirens wailed from somewhere near the gate. Sarah moved through it all like a ghost, no panic, no wasted motion. Her mind replayed the situation briefing. One subject, assault rifle, possible explosives. 3 hostages, 2 adults, 1 child. 15 minutes elapsed, 15 remaining. That was enough. If she could make contact within 5. By the time she reached the outer perimeter, the base had transformed. Barricades, emergency lights, tactical trucks forming a rough half-circle around the main entrance. Personnel huddled behind armored vehicles, radios crackling with static. The moment she stepped into view, heads turned. A security officer jogged over, saluting. "Lieutenant Commander Martinez, ma'am. We've established visual but no verbal communication. He's behind a civilian sedan, 3 hostages inside. Snipers. 2 positions. Orders are to hold until you assess." Sarah scanned the field through borrowed binoculars. The subject crouched behind a silver car, rifle angled across the hood, one trembling hand gripping the woman nearest him. A man and small child were pressed against the driver's door. The child's face, tear-streaked, frozen in shock, anchored her focus. Explosive vest. Possible thick layers, wiring near the collar. She lowered the glass. "Okay, we keep the snipers cold, no movement until I say." "Yes, ma'am." As she stepped toward the command tent, she heard murmurs following her. Some recognized her, most didn't. But every one of them saw the way she carried herself, shoulders squared, eyes locked, voice controlled. Inside the tent, Commander Peterson stood over a map, tension carved into every line of his face. He looked up as she entered. Relief washed through his expression like a tide. "Martinez, thank God you're up." "Situation." He gestured to the live feed from a security drone. Subject identified as Caleb Morris, civilian contractor, discharged last year for misconduct, claims the Navy ruined his life. He wants public acknowledgement and $2 million transferred to his account. Classic displaced rage, Sarah said. Any indication of actual explosives? Unconfirmed. We can't risk calling his bluff. Sarah studied the feed again. The man's stance, his grip on the rifle, his constant packing, it wasn't random. It was practiced but unraveling. The sort of control a soldier clings to when he's already lost everything else. I'll talk to him. Peterson hesitated. You'll be unarmed. I'll have distance. Martinez. Sir, he asked for someone in authority. That means he's still negotiating, which means he still wants to be heard. Peterson exhaled slowly. Understood, you have operational command. As she stepped back into the sunlight, voices from the perimeter crackled over radios. Commander Martinez moving to front line. Copy, holding fire. She approached the open space beyond the barricades, arms visible, pace measured. 50 yards, 40, 30. Caleb, she called, her voice clear but not loud. I'm Lieutenant Commander Martinez. I'm here to talk. The man's head jerked up. His rifle twitched toward her. Stay back. I'm unarmed, she said. No one's going to rush you. I just need to understand what's happening. His voice cracked, half rage, half desperation. You people don't listen. You ruin lives and pretend it's for the greater good. She took another slow step. Then make me listen. Tell me what they did. A pause. Then words spilled out, fragments of betrayal, lost contracts, denied benefits. He was spiraling, and every syllable told her the same story. Guilt mixed with shame, redirected outward. She'd seen it before, in men who couldn't forgive themselves for surviving. While he ranted, she scanned. Rifle loaded, safety off. Vest homemade, wiring uneven, amateur, maybe even fake. But she couldn't assume. The child sobbed. Caleb flinched at the sound, eyes darting between Sarah and the boy. That was her opening. Caleb, she said softly, that's not your enemy, that's a child. His jaw tightened. You think I don't know that? I think you remember what it was like to be scared and helpless, she said. You were a soldier once. You protected people like him. For a heartbeat, something shifted behind his eyes, memory, recognition. Sarah kept her distance, but lowered her voice. I read your record. You served in Anbar province, 2 tours. You saved 6 civilians from an ambush. How would you know that? Because I do my homework before I talk to anyone holding a gun. Another flicker, the smallest crack in the armor. She stepped closer. You've already proved who you are. You don't need to prove it again with blood. Silence stretched. Then quietly, they took everything from me. I believe you, she said, but this isn't the way to get it back. The woman hostage whimpered. Caleb's breathing quickened. His finger tightened on the trigger, then eased. Caleb, Sarah whispered, I need you to put the weapon down and take a step back. We can fix this, but not if anyone gets hurt. He shook his head violently. They'll shoot me. Not while I'm here. That was the promise. And in that moment, she meant it completely. She raised one hand slowly, palm out. You trusted people once, trust me now. Seconds stretched into eternity. Then he dropped the rifle. Sarah moved instantly, stepping forward, guiding the hostages away. Behind her, tactical units surged from cover, swift and silent, securing the suspect before he could change his mind. It was over. No shots, no blood. Only the heavy, stunned quiet that follows narrowly averted tragedy. Hours later, the sun was setting when Sarah finally stepped out of the debriefing tent. The adrenaline was fatting, leaving behind the familiar ache in her shoulders. Across the lot she saw them, Jessica, Amanda, Kelly, standing at the edge of the perimeter watching. Their faces held none of the arrogance she remembered from the morning, only awe and shame. As she walked past, none of them spoke. They didn't need to. For the first time, they understood who she was. And for the first time, she let herself wonder if that understanding mattered. Later that night, she sat alone in her quarters. The base was quiet now. Outside, the ocean kept its rhythm, steady, endless, indifferent. Sarah leaned back in her chair, staring at the half-finished report on her laptop. The words blurred together. The mission was complete, the hostages were safe. But she couldn't shake the locker room from her mind. The laughter, the looks, the way she'd stayed silent. She could handle danger. What she still struggled with was misunderstanding. Being seen and unseen in the same breath. People thought strength was loud, visible, undeniable. But real strength was quieter. It was the choice not to retaliate. To hold composure when ego screamed for revenge. To walk into gunfire if it meant protecting people who might never know your name. That was her curse. And her calling. She closed the laptop, rubbed her eyes, and whispered to no one. They'll never know the half of it. The radio on her desk crackled. Lieutenant Commander Martinez, command wants you in the morning for post-incident review. She pressed the receiver, copy that. As she reached to turn off the light, a soft knock echoed from the door. Come in. Jessica stood there, still in uniform, face pale but resolute. Behind her, Amanda and Kelly. Ma'am, Jessica said quietly, we wanted to thank you for today, for everything. Sarah studied their faces, guilt, respect, confusion. They looked younger now, stripped of bravado. You don't owe me thanks, she said gently. You owe yourselves a lesson. Jessica swallowed hard. We misjudged you, all of us. Sarah gave a small nod. Then maybe start by not doing that to the next person who doesn't fit your picture of normal. They nodded silent. And for a long moment, no one moved. Finally, Sarah said, get some rest, we've all earned it. As they left, she watched their reflections fade in the window glass. She knew the next days would bring questions, rumors, paperwork. But none of that mattered. Because tonight, no one had died. And somewhere in the dark, 3 women had begun to change. She turned back to the window. The moonlight caught the faint outline of her uniform insignia. And in that reflection, she saw the truth she'd always known. Sometimes leadership isn't about command. It's about silence, composure, and the courage to keep walking forward when no one else can. How do you return to silence after the whole base has heard your name whispered with awe? Morning crept across the naval base in shades of gold and steel. The sun climbed over the hangars, catching the rippled flag that moved lazily in the breeze. From a distance, the world looked calm again, but inside the base command building, calm was an illusion. Sarah Martinez stood before a table of senior officers, posture immaculate, eyes level. She had spent the last 3 hours recounting every second of yesterday's incident, every command issued, every risk taken, every calculation that had separated life from death. Now, as the final slide faded from the briefing monitor, she fell silent. The room stayed quiet for a long moment. Then Commander Peterson leaned back in his chair. Textbook work, Lieutenant Commander. Hostages unharmed, subject detained. Not a single shot fired. Sarah nodded slightly. The team performed well, sir. The team performed well, Peterson repeated with a knowing half-smile. But let's be clear, you were the difference. That man would be dead right now if you hadn't walked out there. Sarah didn't answer. Compliments made her uneasy, especially when they brushed too close to truth. Peterson sighed, leaning forward on his elbows. You've done this before, haven't you? Enough times to know there's no perfect ending, she replied softly. He nodded, still hell of a thing to watch. The men are talking about it, word spreading across the fleet already. Sarah kept her expression neutral, though the thought sent a flicker of dread through her. Recognition was dangerous currency in her line of work. She was supposed to be invisible, part of the background hum of base life, not a name on anyone's lips. "Sir," she said, "if the situation allows, I'd prefer the official report not include personal details about my role. The less attention, the better." Peterson studied her a moment, then nodded. "Understood. You're good at disappearing, Martinez, almost too good." A faint, tired smile touched her lips. "That's the point, sir." The meeting ended. Papers were gathered, chairs scraped the floor, and within minutes Sarah found herself walking alone through the long, echoing corridor that led back toward her quarters. Outside, sailors were already moving through morning drills. Some saluted her, others just looked. She felt the shift in their eyes, the change from disregard to respect. It wasn't admiration she sought. It never was, but it still unsettled her. Because attention, even respectful attention, could get people hurt. The base gym was almost empty when she entered an hour later. She preferred it that way, the sound of metal weights, the rhythmic hum of treadmills, the quiet she could control. But this morning, the silence was interrupted. 3 figures stood by the entrance, waiting. Jessica Chen, Amanda Rodriguez, and Kelly Thompson. Uniforms crisp, posture straight, expressions uncertain. Sarah stopped mid-step. The memory of their laughter yesterday morning flickered through her mind. How strange, she thought, that a single day could redraw the entire map of human respect. "Lieutenant Commander Martinez," Jessica said formally, voice steady but humble, "we'd like a moment of your time." Sarah looked at her for a long beat, then motioned toward the benches near the wall. "At ease." The 3 relaxed slightly but remained standing. Their faces told a story before any of them spoke, a story of regret, confusion, and quiet admiration they didn't quite know how to express. Jessica stepped forward first. "Ma'am, about yesterday, our behavior was completely out of line. We judged you without cause. We disrespected you, your position, and your service. There's no excuse." Amanda added softly, "We thought we were exposing arrogance. Instead, we exposed our own." Kelly swallowed hard. "You could have destroyed our careers for what we did, but you didn't." Sarah listened in silence, arms loosely crossed. No anger, no satisfaction, just quiet thought. "I appreciate your honesty," she said finally. "But I'm not interested in apologies. I'm interested in growth. If you learned something from what happened, that's worth more than any formal apology." Jessica nodded quickly. "We did, ma'am, more than you know." Sarah gestured for them to sit. They hesitated, then obeyed, perching on the bench like cadets waiting for a verdict. "Tell me," Sarah said calmly, "why did you treat me the way you did yesterday?" Jessica looked down at her hands. "Because you didn't fit. You were different, quiet, detached. We told ourselves you thought you were better than us." Amanda added, "We thought we were standing up for each other, but really we were feeding off each other's insecurities." Sarah nodded slowly. "That's usually how it starts." Kelly frowned. "Ma'am, can I ask something?" "Go ahead." "Why didn't you say anything that day? In the locker room, you could have shut us down the moment we started. You could have pulled rank, or worse." Sarah exhaled. "Because my job required me to stay invisible. The moment I revealed authority, I compromised operational security. And because," she paused, eyes softening, "because sometimes silence is the only thing that teaches people to listen." The words hung in the air like something fragile and heavy at once. Jessica's jaw tightened. "We didn't deserve that level of restraint." "Maybe not," Sarah said. "But leadership isn't about giving people what they deserve. It's about giving them what they need." Amanda's eyes glistened. "And what did we need?" "To learn the difference between strength and cruelty," Sarah said quietly. No one spoke for several seconds. The sound of a barbell clinking in the distance filled the silence. Finally, Jessica stood. "Ma'am, we'd like to request formal disciplinary action." Sarah blinked, caught off guard. "You're requesting it?" "Yes, ma'am," Jessica said firmly. "We harassed a superior officer. We violated conduct codes. We should face consequences." Sarah regarded them for a long, measured moment. Then she shook her head. "I won't be filing any reports." Amanda frowned. "Ma'am, we don't want special treatment." "This isn't special treatment," Sarah interrupted gently. "This is judgment, my judgment. You've already faced the only punishment that matters: self-awareness. Formal reprimands teach fear. Experience teaches conscience." The three women exchanged glances, unsure how to respond. Sarah stood, her tone softening. "If you want to make amends, don't waste it on paperwork. Do something that matters. Make this base better than it was yesterday." Kelly leaned forward. "How?" "Start with the people you overlook," Sarah said. "The new arrivals, the quiet ones, the ones who don't quite fit. Treat them the way you wish you treated me." Jessica's voice dropped. "You're serious?" "Dead serious," Sarah said. "Leadership isn't a rank, it's a choice. Start leading from wherever you are." The three nodded slowly. There was no dramatic music, no cinematic apology, just three people deciding quietly to change. As they stood to leave, Sarah added, "And one more thing." They turned. "Don't spend the rest of your careers trying to make up for yesterday," she said. "Spend it making sure yesterday never repeats itself." The words struck home. All three saluted before leaving, this time not out of protocol, but out of genuine respect. Later that afternoon, Sarah sat in her temporary office, reviewing reports. The knock on her door made her look up. Commander Peterson stepped inside, holding a folder. "Your assessment's halfway done, but I'm getting chatter from half the departments. People are different. Different. More collaborative. Less gossip. Someone told me the three petty officers who caused the locker room scene are now volunteering for morale projects." Sarah's lips curved faintly. "Good." Peterson nodded approvingly. "You've got a strange way of fixing things, Martinez." "I don't fix people," she said quietly. "I just give them a reason to want to be better." He studied her for a moment, then smiled. "Remind me never to get on your bad side." Her expression softened. "I don't have a bad side, Commander, just boundaries." Peterson laughed, saluted, and left. When the door clicked shut, Sarah leaned back in her chair. Her mind wandered, not to yesterday's crisis, but to something older. Another mission, another base, another group of people who had once doubted her. It was always the same. She arrive, unseen and underestimated. Then something would happen, something that forced her to reveal what she was capable of. And afterward, the silence that followed always felt heavier than before. Because once people see you, you can never be invisible again. That night, as the sky deepened to indigo and the air turned cool, Sarah walked along the shoreline path behind the base. The ocean stretched out black and endless, its rhythm syncing with her own heartbeat. She thought about Caleb Morris, the hostage taker, how his eyes had softened when he saw the child cry. She wondered if he'd ever had someone who believed in him before everything fell apart. She thought about Jessica, Amanda, and Kelly, their faces the moment they realized she wasn't who they thought. And she thought about herself, how many times she'd been on both sides of that moment, misjudged and judging, misunderstood and misunderstanding. Her boots crunched softly over gravel. The world was still. "Sometimes," she murmured to herself, "the hardest battles are the ones no one sees." The wind tugged at her hair, carrying away the words like a confession to the night. The next morning, Sarah arrived early at the command center for her routine briefing. The duty officer handed her a fresh report. "Base Security Cohesion Index, up 12% this week," he said, sounding almost surprised. "Morale indicators are trending positive." Sarah smiled faintly. Good news spreads faster than rumors, apparently. But as she walked toward her office, a young ensign caught her attention. He was standing near the bulletin board, shoulders tense, eyes on the floor while two older sailors snickered nearby. It was subtle, quiet, but unmistakable. The same kind of exclusion she'd felt in that locker room weeks ago. Sarah paused, watched, waited. Then from down the hall Jessica Chen appeared, head high, steps confident. She stopped beside the young ensign, said something low but firm to the two sailors, and they dispersed immediately. Sarah didn't need to hear the words. She already knew their weight. Jessica placed a hand on the ensign's shoulder, gave a reassuring nod, and walked away. For the first time that week, Sarah allowed herself a genuine smile. Maybe people really could change. That evening, Sarah received a short message from Commander Peterson. Base commendation submitted for exemplary crisis leadership and personnel development outcomes. She read it twice, then quietly deleted it. Recognition wasn't why she was here. Impact was. Outside her window, the flag still rippled under the floodlights. The air smelled faintly of salt and jet fuel, the scent of discipline and distance. Sarah stood there a long time, thinking of everything that had unfolded since that morning in the locker room. How quickly judgment can turn into shame. How silence can carry more authority than shouting ever could. And how sometimes the best way to lead is to stand so quietly that others hear their own conscience for the first time. How do you live among people who only know half of who you are? The question haunted Sarah more than she liked to admit. Weeks had passed since the hostage crisis. The base had returned to its daily rhythm, morning drills, briefings, training rotations. But for Sarah, nothing about it felt routine anymore. Her name carried quiet weight now. Conversations paused when she entered a room. Salutes came faster, and the same people who once dismissed her now seemed to orbit her with cautious reverence. It was easier when they ignored her. Because respect, like suspicion, made her visible, and visibility was the enemy of her work. She sat alone in the mess hall that morning, the low hum of voices filling the air. The smell of burnt coffee and scrambled eggs clung to the walls. Across the room she saw Jessica, Amanda, and Kelly sitting together, not whispering, not gossiping, but listening. Two new recruits sat with them, clearly nervous. Jessica leaned forward, smiling in a way Sarah had never seen before, reassuring, patient. Sarah pretended not to notice, but a quiet satisfaction flickered through her chest. People could change. She had seen it in battlefields, in briefings, and now in a cafeteria. Still, she didn't stay long. Too many eyes turned toward her as she stood. Too many hushed voices trailed behind her. She left her tray, walked out into the morning light, and exhaled as if she'd been holding her breath the entire time. Outside, the sea breeze carried salt and engine oil. She liked that mix. It reminded her of deployment, the paradox of danger and calm. Her phone vibrated in her pocket. No name, just a coded sequence of numbers she recognized instantly. She stepped behind a supply building and answered. Martinez. Verification, Bravo Sierra 47. Confirmed, she replied. There was a pause, then a voice she hadn't heard in months, measured, clipped, unmistakably official. Commander Rains, you're still in position. Yes, sir, base assessment is ongoing. Good, you've got new orders. Sarah straightened unconsciously. What kind? Follow up on the Morris incident. Intelligence believes he wasn't acting alone. We've traced encrypted communications to an external contact, possibly someone inside the installation. Her pulse slowed. You're saying there's a leak? Potentially. We need verification. Quietly. Continue your assessment but initiate Phase 2. Phase 2. The part of the assignment that had been theoretical until now. Understood, she said. And Martinez, keep it clean. No one on base knows about this. Your eyes only." The line went dead. She slipped the phone back into her pocket, the calm expression never leaving her face. But inside, her mind had already shifted gears. A leak inside the base. Someone feeding information to an external contact. And she was now tasked with finding them. The irony didn't escape her. Only weeks ago, people had accused her of being a spy. Now she'd have to become one again. That night, Sarah reviewed access logs in her office. The glow of the monitor illuminated her face in the darkness. Most of the data was routine: entry and exit timestamps, clearance levels, shift reports. But at 200 hours 2 nights ago, someone had accessed the communications building using a Level 3 passcode. Level 3 meant limited tactical clearance, restricted to 6 people on base. None of them should have been there at that hour. She cross-referenced the ID: Rodriguez Amanda. Her brow furrowed. Amanda had been part of the original trio that confronted her. Since the incident, she'd been one of the most active in morale programs, dedicated, consistent. But 200 hours. That didn't fit. Sarah stared at the screen for a long moment before closing the laptop. No conclusions, no assumptions, just observation. She learned that lesson long ago: evidence first, judgment later. The next morning, Sarah joined Commander Peterson for a base-wide inspection. The man was in good spirits, proud of the improvements she'd helped implement. "Morale's up 20%, he said as they walked the perimeter. "Even the training scores have improved. Whatever you're doing, it's working." Sarah smiled faintly. "It's not me, sir, it's them. People perform better when they feel seen." Peterson chuckled. "And yet you prefer not to be seen yourself." Sarah glanced toward the horizon. "Visibility isn't always safety, sir." He nodded thoughtfully. "You've got a strange kind of wisdom, Martinez. Comes from experience, I guess." "Experience," she said quietly, "and mistakes." They finished the inspection and parted ways. But as Sarah turned toward the administrative wing, she caught sight of Amanda exiting the comms building. Her pace quickened slightly. "Petty Officer Rodriguez," Sarah called out. Amanda froze, startled, then turned. "Ma'am." Sarah approached casually, hands clasped behind her back. "You were in communications." "Yes, ma'am. I was dropping off a maintenance report for Chief Ellis. He said to leave it on his desk." Sarah studied her expression. Open, steady, not defensive. If she was lying, she was good at it. "Everything all right, ma'am?" Amanda asked. Sarah nodded slowly. "Yes, just routine follow-up." Amanda smiled faintly. "Of course, ma'am." When she walked away, Sarah watched her go, unease coiling in her chest. She wanted to believe her, she really did. But in her world, belief was the first step toward blindness. That evening, Sarah reviewed surveillance footage. She watched Amanda enter the building at 1:57 hours, just as the log indicated. She carried a folder under her arm, as she'd said. She walked directly to the chief's office, dropped something off, and left 5 minutes later. Nothing suspicious. Except something caught Sarah's attention. Before exiting, Amanda paused by a restricted door. Not long, just 2 seconds, enough to glance at it, enough to hesitate. "Why?" Sarah rewound, watched again. The motion was subtle, almost subconscious, but trained eyes noticed patterns others missed. Amanda had looked at that door with recognition, not curiosity. That meant she'd been inside before. And that door, the secure communications relay room, was supposed to be locked to all but 3 people on base. Sarah was one of them. Later that night, Sarah walked the base alone. The air was cool, the night quiet except for distant hums of generators. She moved like a shadow through the corridors, her thoughts looping between possibilities. She didn't want to believe Amanda could be the leak. The woman had changed, had grown. But trust was a luxury Sarah had long since learned she couldn't afford. Her path took her back to the locker room. the same one where everything had begun. She stood there for a while, listening to the faint hum of fluorescent lights. The echoes of that first confrontation seemed to linger in the tiles, ghosts of judgment and misunderstanding. She'd forgiven them, that wasn't the issue. But forgiveness didn't erase patterns, and trust didn't erase vigilance. The next morning, a coded message came through her secure terminal. Contact confirmed. Suspected leak transmitting from base frequencies between 01000300. Maintain observation. No direct confrontation until confirmation. Sarah closed the message, her stomach tightening. Between 1 and 3 in the morning. The same time frame Amanda had been there. She needed proof, hard proof. That night she returned to the communications building under the guise of a routine systems audit. The corridors were dark, the hum of machinery the only sound. She moved quietly, her steps measured, controlled. At 1:25, faint footsteps echoed down the hall. Sarah ducked behind a corner, watching. Amanda. She approached the restricted door, glanced around and swiped an access card. The lock clicked open. Sarah's heart sank. Amanda slipped inside. Sarah waited 5 seconds, then followed. The relay room glowed with pale blue light. Screens flickered with encrypted data. Amanda stood before a terminal, inserting a small drive into the port. Sarah stepped from the shadows. Stop. Amanda froze, shoulders stiffening. Slowly she turned. Lieutenant Commander, her voice trembled. Sarah stepped closer, eyes hard but calm. You want to explain what you're doing? Amanda swallowed. It's not what it looks like. It looks like espionage. Tears welled in Amanda's eyes. Please, ma'am, just listen. Sarah hesitated. You have 30 seconds. Amanda pulled the drive free, holding it out. I wasn't stealing data. I was sending a distress packet. Sarah frowned. A what? For my brother, Amanda said. He's stationed overseas. His unit hasn't checked in for weeks. I used the relay to ping a contact in the field. I just needed to know he's alive. Sarah stared at her. You bypassed classified systems for a personal message. Amanda nodded weakly. I know it was wrong. I didn't think anyone would notice. I just needed to try. Sarah took the drive from her, weighing it in her palm. It wasn't an excuse she'd expected, and it wasn't easy to verify. But Amanda's face told its own story. Guilt, fear, desperation. Sarah exhaled slowly. You could have compromised the entire base. I know, Amanda whispered. I'll accept whatever punishment you think I deserve. Sarah studied her for a long time. The silence stretched like wire. Finally, she pocketed the drive. You're lucky I found you first. Amanda's eyes widened. Ma'am. There's an actual leak, Sarah said quietly. Someone outside this base has been tapping our frequencies. Your message could have given them an open channel. Amanda paled. Oh my God. Sarah stepped closer, voice low. From now on, you report directly to me. No one else knows about this. Understood? Yes, ma'am. Good. You're going to help me find the real leak. Amanda blinked. You trust me. Sarah gave a faint smile. Not yet, but I believe in second chances. As Sarah left the comms building, dawn was breaking over the base. The horizon burned orange and gold, and the first jets of the day thundered overhead. She stopped, watching them cut through the sky, feeling the familiar ache of duty in her chest. For years she'd lived between two worlds, the soldier and the shadow, the officer and the ghost. But here, now, something was changing. This wasn't just another mission anymore. This was about people, about trust, about the fragile hope that even in a system built on secrecy, humanity could still survive. She tightened her grip on the data drive, eyes hard with determination. There was a traitor somewhere on this base, and she was going to find them, no matter what it cost. How do you trust someone when you've built your life on secrets. The next 48 hours were quiet, but not peaceful. To the rest of the base, Lieutenant Commander Sarah Martinez was back to her usual schedule, conducting security reviews, attending briefings, running morning drills. But beneath that facade, a hidden operation had begun. She and Amanda worked in silence, always apart, never at the same time, never in the same place. To anyone watching, it looked like routine administrative work. In reality, it was an intelligence net, a slow, methodical hunt for the unseen hand behind the leak. The drive Amanda had used was clean, no malware, no evidence of contact with the external frequency. That confirmed her story, but someone else had used the same relay line recently. Someone smarter, someone careful enough to cover their tracks. At 200 hours on the third night, Sarah sat in the dark of her quarters, reviewing encrypted logs. Amanda's data traces glowed faintly across the monitor, thread-like patterns of code, pools in green against black. And then she saw it. A line of transmission metadata. Different ID, same frequency window, timestamp 1 week before the hostage crisis. She magnified the data. The access signature wasn't standard military. It was masked through a civilian maintenance channel. Whoever it was had been inside the base system long enough to mimic ordinary traffic. Her hand tightened around her pen. This wasn't a single leak. It was an infiltration. By morning, Sarah's expression gave nothing away. She stood at the briefing table beside Commander Peterson, discussing procedural upgrades. Her tone was even, calm, professional. But inside, her thoughts were already mapping out contingency routes. If an infiltration was confirmed, protocol demanded escalation to the Office of Naval Intelligence. But doing that now could expose her investigation, and whoever was inside would vanish before she could confirm their identity. Martinez, Peterson said, cutting through her thoughts. You all right? She blinked once. Yes, sir, just reviewing details. Don't burn yourself out, he said with an easy smile. You've already done enough for this base to last a career. Sarah nodded, offering the faintest hint of a smile. With respect, sir, no one ever done enough. He chuckled, shaking his head, spoken like a seal. The word hit her chest like an echo. Seal? He didn't know, not fully, but he'd guessed the truth that lingered beneath her cover. And that truth came with ghosts. That evening, she found Amanda waiting outside the operations building. The young woman looked tense, hands stuffed into her pockets. Ma'am, she said quietly, I think I found something. Sarah motioned her to follow. They slipped into the dimly lit storage room, neutral ground, far from prying eyes. Amanda pulled a folded sheet from her uniform. Access record from 2 days before the hostage situation. Someone used my clearance ID at 2300 hours, but I wasn't even on base that night. Sarah unfolded the paper, scanning it. You're sure this isn't a log error? Amanda shook her head. I cross-checked it. The timestamp's valid. Whoever it was, they cloned my credentials. Sarah's pulse quickened. You're certain no one else had physical access to your ID card? Positive. I keep it with me at all times. Sarah exhaled slowly. Then the leak isn't just accessing communications. They're manipulating clearance levels. Amanda swallowed. What do we do? Sarah's gaze hardened. We set a trap. That night, Sarah initiated Operation Glassline, a covert observation grid designed for internal counterintelligence. She created a decoy file on the base network, classified enough to draw attention, but harmless if accessed. The file contained fake operational coordinates and a planted anomaly code, a fingerprint. If the infiltrator opened it, she'd know. For the first time in years, Sarah felt that familiar pulse of adrenaline, the same rhythm she'd known in combat zones, waiting for a target to make their move. Only now the battlefield wasn't a desert or a city, it was trust itself. 2 nights later, the bait was taken. At 1:43 hours, her console pinged softly, a coded alert that someone had breached the decoy file. She pulled up the trace, eyes narrowing. The signal originated from the maintenance sector. Not a communications officer. Not admin. Maintenance. The civilian contractor team rotated weekly. Engineers, technicians, electricians. People who came and went quietly. Perfect cover. Sarah slipped on her jacket, her heartbeat steadying into that slow, surgical calm. She moved through the corridors like smoke, blending into shadow. When she reached the maintenance wing, only one light burned, a small office near the end of the hall. She stepped closer, silent. Through the glass, she could see the faint reflection of a man at a terminal, civilian uniform, headset on, focused. His nameplate read, M. Lasker. She recognized him, the quiet technician who handled minor electrical faults, always polite, always invisible. Sarah watched his fingers move over the keyboard, transmitting data across a secure line. He didn't even look nervous. She stepped inside. "Don't move," she said quietly. Lasker froze, eyes widening as she revealed the sidearm from her vest, unholstered but angled low. "Turn off the terminal," she said. He hesitated. "Lieutenant Commander, I." "Now." He complied. Sarah moved closer, her voice steady. "Who are you sending that data to?" He swallowed. "You wouldn't understand." "Try me." He looked up, defiance flickering behind the fear. "You think this system is clean. You think your commanders aren't hiding worse." Sarah's expression didn't change. "So you're exposing corruption by betraying the same people protecting you." "I'm exposing lies," he snapped. "Everything's compartmentalized, layers on layers of secrecy. You follow orders, but you never ask why." Her jaw tightened. "I've asked why, I just never let it justify treason." He flinched at the word. "You don't get it, the things I've seen." Sarah cut him off. "You don't get to justify endangering lives because you think you're enlightened." Lasker's hands trembled. "You don't know what they did overseas, what they're covering up." Her heartbeat stilled. For a second, something raw flickered across her face. "I know," she said quietly. "I was there." He blinked, thrown off. "What?" Sarah's voice dropped, steady as a knife's edge. "Anbar, Kandahar, Somalia, choose your ghost. I've seen the things you're talking about. The difference is, I stayed to fix them from within." Lasker stared at her, silent. "Now," she said, "you're going to tell me who's pulling your strings." He exhaled, shoulders slumping. "You'll never reach them. They're embedded deep, offshore networks, government contracts, black budgets. They don't care about you. You're just another tool." "Maybe," she said softly, "but tools can break people too." He looked up at her, realization dawning too late. She'd already activated her wrist communicator. Within 30 seconds, base security stormed the room, weapons raised. Lasker didn't resist. He just stared at Sarah as they cuffed him, a faint smile curling on his lips. "You'll see, Lieutenant Commander," he murmured. "Truth doesn't stay buried forever." Sarah said nothing. She just watched as they led him away. Hours later, she sat alone in the debriefing room. Commander Peterson paced near the door, disbelief etched across his face. "Civilian contractor leaking intel through maintenance relays," he muttered. "We never even saw it." "He was smart," Sarah said quietly. "Used back-channel encryption, built a fake ID ladder under routine system checks." Peterson shook his head. "You stopped him before he could transmit full data. You probably saved us a disaster." Sarah didn't answer. Her gaze had drifted to the dark window, where her reflection stared back, calm, detached, tired. Peterson studied her. "You've done good work, Martinez, but I have to ask, how did you know where to look?" She turned, her eyes unreadable. "Experience, sir. Patterns repeat. People don't change as much as they think." He nodded slowly. accepting that as her final word. When she left the office, the night was deep again, quiet, heavy, the kind of silence that made her think too much. Amanda waited outside, leaning against the wall. "Was it him?" she asked. "Yes," Sarah said, "it's over." Amanda's shoulders relaxed. "You caught him before he could do more damage." Sarah nodded but didn't smile. He thought he was doing the right thing. Amanda frowned, by betraying his own people. Sarah looked out toward the dark ocean. People justify anything when they feel unseen. Amanda hesitated. "You almost sound like you pity him." Sarah's voice was soft. "I understand him." She started walking, and Amanda fell into step beside her. "Ma'am," Amanda said quietly, "can I ask something personal?" Sarah glanced at her. "Depends on the question." "What made you join? The SEALs, the operations, all of it." Sarah's pace slowed. For a moment she didn't answer. Then she said, "A promise." "To who?" She exhaled. "Someone who didn't make it back." Amanda looked down. "I'm sorry." Sarah shook her head. "Don't be. Regret is a luxury. I made a promise that if I ever survived the things that broke us, I'd make them mean something." They walked in silence for a long moment. Finally, Sarah said, "That's the hardest part about this job. It's not the danger. It's learning to live with what you know and who you couldn't save." Amanda nodded, understanding more than words could say. Back in her quarters, Sarah sat on the edge of her bunk, staring at the faint scar running along her forearm, an old wound from a mission no one would ever read about. The base was safe, the leak was contained. But peace never lasted long in her world. She knew another call would come. It always did. The phone on her desk blinked once. No ringtone, just a coded pulse of light, her direct line from the Shadow Division. She reached for it but didn't answer right away. For a few precious seconds she just sat there, breathing, existing, human. Then she picked it up. "Martinez." The voice on the other end was calm, familiar. "Stand by for new orders." She closed her eyes briefly. "Copy that." As the connection went silent, she looked out her window. The dawn was just beginning to break, a soft wash of color over steel and sea. And she thought, not for the first time, the world never runs out of people who need saving. And maybe, in saving them, she could still save herself. How do you keep fighting for a world that no longer remembers your name? Sarah stared at the encrypted message flickering across her terminal. Operation: Silent Harbor, initiate immediate deployment. Objective: extraction and containment of rogue operative. Location: classified to be disclosed in transit. Duration: indefinite. Authorization: Tier 1 command. No signature, no warning, just orders. She leaned back in her chair, the glow of the monitor soft against her tired eyes. It had been only 2 days since the Lasker arrest, 2 days since the base began to breathe again. But peace, in her world, was always a borrowed hour. Her reflection stared back from the screen, sharp, calm, composed, the face of someone who couldn't afford to hesitate. And yet, for the first time in a long while, she hesitated. Because leaving now meant cutting ties. It meant vanishing without explanation. And this time, she wasn't sure she wanted to disappear again. Morning came gray and cold. The ocean looked metallic under the overcast sky. She packed quickly, efficient, practiced movements, tactical vest, field gear, minimal personal items. She'd done this hundreds of times, but somehow this one felt heavier. A knock sounded on her door. "Come in," she said without turning. Amanda stepped inside. Her expression softened when she saw the duffel. "You're leaving." Sarah zipped the bag, nodded. "Orders came through last night." "For how long?" "Unknown." Amanda stood there for a moment, then said quietly, "I thought, maybe after everything, you'd finally get to rest." Sarah gave a small, humorless smile. Rest isn't in the job description. Amanda hesitated. Can I ask, where are they sending you? Sarah shook her head. Even if I knew, I couldn't tell you. Amanda stepped closer. Then at least tell me why you keep saying yes. Sarah met her eyes, her voice barely above a whisper. Because I don't know how to say no. The words hung there, fragile, honest, unguarded. Amanda swallowed hard. You've done more for this base than anyone ever will. You've earned the right to walk away. Sarah looked down. Maybe, but walking away isn't the same as being free. Amanda wanted to say more, but the tone in Sarah's voice stopped her. So instead she nodded slowly and said, then come back, that's all I ask. Sarah gave a small nod in return. I'll try. But they both knew try was a word people used when they weren't sure they'd survive. By noon the helicopter was ready. The rotor wash whipped through the air, salt and sand stinging her face. Commander Peterson stood near the pad, hands on his hips, eyes sharp. You sure you don't want a formal send-off, Martinez, after everything you've done? She shook her head. Low profile suits me better, sir. He smiled faintly, always did. Then his voice softened. You've made a difference here, you know that, right? Sarah's gaze drifted toward the horizon. Maybe, but differences fade. What matters is what stays behind. He gave her a long look, half pride, half worry. Take care of yourself out there. She nodded once, stepped onto the chopper and didn't look back. The ride was long, silent, and gray. The pilot didn't speak. The hum of the blades drowned out every thought. Halfway through the flight, Sarah unfolded the mission dossier handed to her before takeoff. One line caught her attention. Subject: former operative, designation Echo 9. Status: missing in action, possible intelligence breach. Last known location: Coastal Research Facility, Eastern Seaboard. Her pulse slowed. Echo 9. She knew that call sign too well. The aircraft's vibration seemed to fade as memory took over. 3 years ago. A desert operation gone wrong. A night when the air smelled of fire and regret. She could still see his face, Captain Marcus Hale, the man who'd once led her team, the man she'd followed into every impossible mission. The man she'd left behind. Echo 9 wasn't just a target. He was her past. The facility came into view through the mist, a cluster of gray structures on the edge of a cliff, half hidden by fog and ocean spray. The chopper touched down on a narrow helipad. A man in civilian clothes approached as she disembarked. Lieutenant Commander Martinez, welcome. I'm Agent Delaney, Site Director. She shook his hand firmly. Status: we've isolated the outer perimeter, Delaney said as they walked. Facility: been on lockdown since contact went dark 2 days ago. We believe Echo 9 barricaded himself inside the control wing. Communications are scrambled. Sarah's voice was steady. Any sign of hostiles? None, but he's armed, and if he's transmitting, it's not to us. She nodded once. I'll go in alone. Delaney hesitated. That's not protocol. Neither is this mission. He studied her face, then simply said, understood. The corridors inside were cold, metallic, humming faintly with emergency power. Sarah moved slowly, weapon drawn but angled low. Every echo in the hall felt like a heartbeat she didn't trust. She found the control wing easily. It was the only door barricaded from the inside. Through the narrow observation window, she could see faint light and movement. She knocked once. Marcus. Silence. She tried again. It's Sarah. A pause, then a voice, low and cracked from disuse. You shouldn't have come here. She exhaled, the old ache in her chest returning. You knew I would. There was a scrape, the sound of something being dragged. Then the door clicked, unlocking. She stepped inside. The man before her was a shadow of the one she remembered. Beard unkempt, uniform tattered, eyes bloodshot but sharp. A sidearm hung loose in his hand, not aimed, not lowered. "You look the same," he said, half smiling. "You don't," she replied softly. He chuckled, then coughed. "I guess war ages us differently." Sarah scanned the room. Equipment dismantled, monitors looping encrypted feeds, data drives scattered across the floor. "What are you doing here, Marcus?" He met her gaze, unflinching. "Finishing what we started." She took a step closer. "Which part of that? The mission that went sideways or the one that broke us?" His jaw tightened, the one command buried. She said nothing. Marcus gestured toward the monitors. "They called it a failed op, said everyone was dead, but I lived, you lived, and now they're rewriting history to erase us." "That's not true," Sarah said. He laughed bitterly. "You really believe that, after everything? You think they sent you here to save me? No, Sarah, they sent you to clean up the mess." Her hand tightened on her weapon. "I came to bring you home." "There's no home left," he said quietly. "Not for people like us." Silence stretched between them. The sound of waves crashing against the cliff filled the space. Sarah's voice was almost a whisper. "You're transmitting, aren't you?" He didn't deny it. "Someone has to know the truth." "Truth doesn't live in stolen data." "Then where does it live, Sarah?" he snapped. "In reports, in debriefings, in the silence of people who obey orders they know are wrong." Her throat tightened. "You think I don't carry that same silence?" He looked at her for a long moment, then softer. "Then why are you still fighting for them?" "Because if I stop, everything we lost means nothing." Marcus lowered the gun, shaking his head. "You still believe in redemption." She took a slow step forward. "No, I believe in responsibility." Their eyes locked. The air between them was thick with years of unspoken things: loyalty, guilt, love, betrayal. Then, without warning, an alarm blared. A system breach. Red light flooded the room. Sarah turned to the console. "Someone's accessing the relay externally." Marcus's voice rose. "You triggered them by coming here. They're tracking you." "Who?" she demanded. "The same people who buried us." The screens flashed coordinates, encryption keys all uploading. Sarah lunged forward, yanking the drives free. Sparks shot from the ports. She slammed her hand against the emergency cutoff. The screens went black. Breathing hard, she looked at him. "Tell me you didn't send anything." He exhaled, eyes haunted. "Not yet." "Then we still have time." She stepped closer. "Marcus, listen to me. If you go down this path, they'll hunt you forever. Let me help you fix this." He looked at her, weary and broken. "You can't fix ghosts, Sarah." She raised her hand slowly. "Maybe not, but I can stop you from becoming one." For a long moment, neither moved. Then, with trembling fingers, Marcus set his weapon on the floor. "I never wanted to hurt anyone," he whispered. "I know," she said softly. "That's why I'm still here." She stepped forward, disarming the console completely. The red lights faded to dim orange. The silence that followed was fragile, like the quiet after a storm that hadn't finished leaving. By the time extraction arrived, Marcus was in custody. He didn't fight it. He just looked at Sarah once, expression unreadable, before being led away. Agent Delaney met her at the exit. "He's lucky you got here first. A minute later, that transmission would have gone global." Sarah didn't reply. She watched as the helicopter lifted off, carrying Marcus toward whatever awaited him. The wind whipped through her hair. The sea roared below. She felt nothing. And everything. That night back in temporary quarters, she stared at the classified report she'd written. Every word was precise, clinical, emotionless. But under the official lines, one truth stayed buried: she hadn't saved him. Not really. She just stopped him from falling further. And in some quiet, painful way, she knew that was all she'd ever be able to do for anyone. The ocean pounded against the cliffs below her window. Sarah whispered to the dark, "Sometimes the hardest rescue is from yourself." Then she turned off the light and let the silence hold her. How do you lead others when you no longer know what you believe in? The return flight was silent. No chatter from the cockpit, no idle conversation through the headset, just the endless thrum of rotors and the weight of everything left unsaid. Sarah stared out the small window as the ocean stretched below her like a sheet of shifting steel. Somewhere down there, she thought, the wreckage of every choice she'd ever made was buried. Marcus's last words replayed in her mind like a wound that wouldn't close. You can't fix ghosts. She tried to tell herself she'd done her job, that stopping him was the right thing, the necessary thing. But necessity didn't ease the guilt. It never did. When the helicopter touched down on base soil, no one waited for her. There was no briefing, no debriefing, no applause. Just wind and salt and the feeling that she'd left part of herself in that facility. She preferred it that way. But as she walked across the tarmac, she noticed something small, almost invisible. A folded note taped to her locker door. No signature, just 3 words written in neat, careful handwriting. "Glad you came back. Amanda." Sarah stood there for a long time, her throat tightening despite herself. For years, she'd lived between missions, between shadows, between names. But this simple piece of paper, reminded her that maybe she wasn't as alone as she thought. Days turned into weeks. The base moved on as bases always do. Training continued, ships came and went, drills echoed across the shoreline. Sarah returned to her duties quietly, evaluations, security checks, early morning runs. But something about her had changed and people could feel it. Her presence carried a heavier stillness now, not cold, just quieter, the kind of calm that came after seeing too much. Amanda noticed it first. The way Sarah lingered at the edge of conversations, listening more, saying less. The way her eyes sometimes drifted toward the sea and stayed there, as if waiting for an answer that never came. One afternoon, Amanda found her in the training yard, sitting alone beside the obstacle course, boots in the dirt, arms resting loosely on her knees. "Ma'am." Sarah looked up. "You don't have to call me that off duty." Amanda smiled faintly. "Old habit." Sarah tilted her head. "You came to run the course." "Actually," Amanda said, sitting beside her, "I came to talk." Sarah raised an eyebrow. "That sounds dangerous." Amanda chuckled softly. "You look different." Sarah looked ahead. "I've been told that happens when you survive too many things you shouldn't." "Is that what happened?" Sarah hesitated, then said quietly, "I found someone I once trusted, someone I couldn't save." Amanda nodded slowly. "I know that feeling, not the same way, but I've lost people I thought I could help." Sarah's voice softened. "It doesn't get easier, you just get quieter about it." For a while they sat in silence, the kind that doesn't need to be filled. The wind carried the sound of distant training drills, the bark of commands, the rhythmic thud of boots on sand. Then Amanda said, "I've been thinking a lot about what you told me, about strength not being loud." Sarah looked at her. "You were right," Amanda said. "I used to think leadership was about being seen, about control, but now I think it's about being steady when everyone else is." Sarah smiled faintly. "Steady is underrated." "Maybe," Amanda said, "but it's contagious." Sarah turned her gaze back to the horizon. "So is hope." Amanda followed her eyes. "Do you still believe in that?" Sarah's voice was almost a whisper. "Some days I have to remind myself." That night she couldn't sleep. The wind howled through the cracks in the barracks window. The moon hung low and heavy, painting the sea in silver. Sarah sat at her desk, writing her report. The mission details were classified, the tone clinical, the sentences stripped of emotion. But beneath the surface, every line felt like a confession. She wrote about containment, recovery, extraction. She didn't write about the look in Marcus's eyes. She didn't write about the silence between them. She didn't write about the part of herself that still wanted to believe he could have been saved. Her hand stopped mid-sentence. For a long moment, she just stared at the page. Then she closed the file and whispered to the dark, "What's the point of surviving if you forget why you fight?" The question echoed in her mind long after the words were gone. The next morning, Commander Peterson called her into his office. "Good work in Silent Harbor," he said. "Word came down from top brass. You neutralized a serious threat." Sarah gave a small nod. Was he a threat? Peterson frowned. He was about to leak classified intelligence. "He was also a soldier who served this country for 15 years, Sarah said quietly. Peterson's expression softened. "You knew him?" "Yes, sir." Peterson leaned back in his chair. "You did what you had to do. That's the job." Sarah looked at him, her voice level. "With respect, sir, if doing the job means erasing the people inside it, maybe the job needs to change." He studied her in silence. There was no defiance in her tone, just weariness, the kind that came from carrying too many invisible burdens. Finally he said, "Take a few days off, you've earned it." She nodded but didn't move. He added softly, "You can't save everyone, Martinez." She looked at him, eyes steady. "That doesn't mean we stop trying." That evening she walked along the beach again. The tide was low, the sand cool beneath her boots. She remembered walking this same stretch months ago, before everything had changed, before the locker room, the hostages, the missions, the ghosts. Now the base lights behind her seemed distant, almost unreal. She crouched, picking up a smooth stone, turning it over in her hand. For a long time she just stared at it. Then she whispered, "For the ones we couldn't bring home," and tossed it into the sea. The splash was small, but it felt like a promise. Over the next few days, Sarah tried something new. She let herself exist. Not as a commander. Not as a symbol. Just as a person. She joined the others in the mess hall, sat through casual conversation, laughed quietly, genuinely. She even sparred during morning drills. The recruits still underestimated her. They always did. And every time she floored one of them with a clean, precise move, she offered a hand to help them up. "Don't fight the person," she'd say. "Fight your fear." They didn't always understand what she meant. But Amanda did. One afternoon, as the group dispersed, Amanda said quietly, "You're different lately, softer but stronger." Sarah smiled. "That's what happens when you stop trying to be unbreakable." Amanda tilted her head. "You think that's possible?" "Maybe not," Sarah said, "but I'm starting to think there's power in the cracks." That night she sat on the barracks roof, the wind tugging gently at her hair. The stars were clear for once, unfiltered by storm or haze. She thought of all the people who'd come and gone. Of the ones who doubted her. The ones who changed. The ones who didn't make it back. And for the first time, she allowed herself to feel something she hadn't in years. Peace, small and fleeting but real. It wasn't closure. Closure didn't exist in her world, but it was enough to breathe without guilt for one night. As she stood to leave, her phone buzzed. A message. Command review. You're being considered for reassignment, potential leadership post. Recommendation level, exceptional. She stared at it, unreadable. A promotion, more authority, more missions, more shadows. The very thing she'd once wanted. Now, it just felt like another wall between who she was and who she might have been. She set the phone down, looking back at the stars. For once, she didn't answer right away. The waves rolled in, slow and constant. And in that sound, she heard something she hadn't in years, her own heartbeat, steady and human. She smiled faintly, whispering into the night. Maybe strength isn't about how long you fight. Maybe it's about remembering why you started. How do you move forward when your whole life has been about standing still? The sea was restless that morning. Waves broke against the rocks like the sound of memory, steady, unforgiving. Sarah watched from the edge of the pier, the wind tugging at her jacket, the salt stinging her lips. It had been 3 weeks since her return. The base had resumed its rhythm. The world hadn't stopped spinning. But inside her, something had shifted, something she didn't quite recognize. For the first time in years, she wasn't sure what she was supposed to do next. The reassignment offer still sat on her desk, unsigned. Tier 1 command, Shadow Unit Reintegration. The words felt heavy, final, like a door closing that she wasn't sure she wanted to walk through again. Behind her, footsteps approached, soft, hesitant. "Figured I'd find you here," Amanda said, her voice carried by the wind. Sarah didn't turn. "You always find me." "Someone got to make sure you eat something before you vanish again." Sarah smiled faintly, not planning to vanish. Amanda stepped beside her, following her gaze out to the horizon. "You got the reassignment notice." Sarah nodded. "Are you going?" Silence stretched between them. Then Sarah said quietly, "They want me to go back underground, back to classified missions, back to silence." Amanda studied her, and Sarah exhaled slowly. "I don't know if I can." "You mean you don't want to?" Sarah looked at her then, the young officer who had once mocked her, now standing beside her as something far closer to a friend. "When you spend enough years in the dark," Sarah said softly, "you start mistaking it for home." Amanda's voice was quiet. "But you brought light here to all of us. You can't unteach that." Sarah looked back at the sea. "Maybe that's exactly why I have to go. Light doesn't last in shadows unless someone carries it there." Amanda shook her head. "And who carries it for you?" Sarah didn't answer because she didn't know. Later that afternoon, Commander Peterson summoned her to his office. He didn't waste words. "You've been offered a Tier 1 position. Congratulations are in order." "Thank you, sir." He studied her. "You don't sound thrilled." Sarah gave a tired smile. "I've learned that promotions don't always mean progress." Peterson leaned back in his chair. "You're one of the best officers I've ever seen, Martinez. You could lead entire teams, hell, divisions with your track record. So what's holding you back?" She hesitated, then said, "Maybe I'm tired of being a weapon that forgets what it's protecting." Peterson was silent for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. "You know, I've seen soldiers burn out before. Usually it's after losing faith in command. But you haven't lost faith in the mission, just the way it's carried out." Sarah's eyes lifted. "There's a difference." "There is," he said, "and people like you remind the rest of us why it matters." He leaned forward. "If you want my advice, don't make this decision as a soldier. Make it as a person. The uniform doesn't define the impact you've had here." She stood at attention, saluted, and said quietly, "That's the hardest order to follow, sir." He smiled faintly. "That's how you know it's the right one." That night the sky burned with sunset, a wash of amber and crimson bleeding into the ocean. Sarah walked alone along the docks. The smell of salt and oil filled the air, the hum of engines fading into the distance. She stopped near the end of the pier, staring down at the water. She remembered her first day on this base, the way the others had laughed at her in that locker room, the humiliation, the silence she'd kept, the mission that had followed. She remembered the fear in Caleb's eyes during the hostage crisis, the shame in Jessica's voice when she apologized, the pain in Marcus's words when he said ghosts couldn't be fixed. All of it, every wound, every scar, had built something she hadn't expected: understanding. She whispered into the wind, "Maybe that's what all this was for." She heard footsteps again, heavier this time. She turned to see Jessica and Kelly approaching, both out of breath from the jog across the dock. "Ma'am," Jessica said, straightening, "sorry to interrupt. We just wanted to say something before you leave. Sarah raised an eyebrow. Who said I'm leaving? Kelly smiled shyly. Rumor mill, you know how it is. Jessica stepped forward. Whatever happens, you change this place. The way we treat people, the way we lead, the way we listen. Sarah tilted her head. That's not me, that's you choosing to change. Jessica shook her head. Maybe, but you gave us the reason. Sarah smiled faintly. Then don't lose it. Kelly hesitated, then said softly, if you go, it's gonna feel like the base lost its compass. Sarah looked at her. Then maybe it's time you learn to be your own. The younger women exchanged a look, part sadness, part pride. Sarah extended her hand. You'll both do fine. Jessica took it, gripping firmly. You taught us more in a few months than training did in years. Sarah smirked. Then maybe the training needs work. They laughed, quiet, genuine, human. And for a moment, it felt like the world might actually be okay. That night, Sarah sat alone at her desk. The reassignment notice still glowed on her screen. Her hand hovered over the digital signature line. She thought of everything the life in shadows had given her: discipline, precision, purpose. And everything it had taken: connection, peace, self. For years, she'd convinced herself that the mission was bigger than her, that she existed to serve something beyond emotion. But maybe service wasn't just about sacrifice. Maybe it was about presence, about staying, even when the world told you to move on. She closed the message without signing it. Her reflection in the darkened screen met her gaze, calm, resolved, finally human again. The next morning she walked into Peterson's office, uniform pressed, boots shining. I'm declining the reassignment, she said simply. Peterson didn't look surprised. I thought you might. I want to stay on base, she continued. Training, operations, mentorship, whatever's needed, but I'm done disappearing. He smiled slowly, almost proudly. You sure about this? Sarah nodded, for the first time in years. He extended his hand. Then it's an honor to have you, really have you here, Lieutenant Commander. She shook it firmly. Thank you, sir. As she left his office, sunlight flooded the corridor. For once, she didn't walk like a ghost. Weeks passed. The base felt lighter somehow, not because the world had grown easier, but because its people had grown stronger. Under Sarah's guidance, training shifted. Discipline remained, but empathy began to breathe beside it. Mistakes became lessons. Respect became currency. And on the walls of the training hall, someone had painted new words in black stencil. Strength isn't how loud you fight, it's how quietly you stand. Sarah never admitted it, but she recognized Amanda's handwriting. One evening after drills, Sarah sat outside with Amanda, Jessica, and Kelly. They shared coffee from tin mugs, the sun dipping low across the horizon. Jessica grinned. You know, it's weird seeing you laugh, ma'am. Sarah smirked. That's because you only saw me when I was cleaning up after you. Amanda chuckled. You sure you don't miss the action, the missions? Sarah took a slow sip, eyes on the horizon. There's action everywhere. You just have to notice the kind that matters. Kelly asked softly, and what kind is that? Sarah smiled faintly. The kind that makes people better instead of breaking them. They all fell silent, listening to the sound of waves crashing against the shore. For the first time in a long time, the silence didn't feel like hiding. It felt like peace. Later that night, Sarah stood once more on the pier, the ocean breathing against the rocks below. Her phone buzzed, a single encrypted ping from command. A final check. A reminder that she could still return if she wanted. She looked at it for a long time, then turned it off. For once, the mission could wait. She tilted her head to the night sky, whispering softly. They teased her once because they couldn't see her strength. Her voice caught, barely a breath. But strength doesn't need to shout. She stood there until dawn, the first light stretching across the horizon, her reflection merging with the sea, not a shadow this time, but part of the world she had fought so long to protect. And when the sun rose fully, she smiled, because she finally understood. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts.